welcome, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today. So first of all, before we really dive into the detail around the rail industry and what collaboration means for the industry, what does collaboration mean more broadly for you? Susan, starting off with you, collaboration.
Yeah, sure. I think it's about achieving more than the sum of the parts. And in fact, I'll quote our transportation MD, because he is always saying 1 + 1 + 1 needs to be more than 3.
There we are, more than 3. Stuart.
We work in a really complex environment in rail, a particularly complex environment. And to do that, we've got to bring all sorts of skills and expertise together. And some of that's in the contracting world, in the investment world. And to do that, the only way you can really get efficient, effective delivery is for all those people who are bringing together the expertise and the skills to work seamlessly for a common goal. So collaboration for me is being really clear about what you're trying to achieve, everyone understanding that and seamlessly working so you don't get distracted by unnecessary bureaucracy or unnecessary hurdles. You're focused on the goal, working together for a common goal.
Andre, is that what it's about for you, common goal?
I can only agree. One vision, one set of objectives, and people working together on a win-win-win principle. Everybody has to be behind all of that, and that's collaboration. Yeah.
Okay, so that's good for talking about what it should look like and what the end goal is. But how do you nurture that? How do you promote it? Stuart, your thoughts on?
Well, you've got to set out the real understanding what it is you're trying to achieve. You've got to be clear. You know, you're not throwing this together. It takes really, really good planning to understand, look, the most effective way we're going to achieve the result we want is this model. Have the right people, have the right teams together, the right expertise and skills. Set out clearly that objective, you know, that vision. This is what we're all working together. Establish common goals, things that will mean what success is. Bring the teams together and then say, this is the way we're going to work. You know, this is the expectation. Excellent outcomes is what we're all about. And we're not going to get distracted by things and be really focused on that and keep coming back to it. And I think, you know, it's not something you can just throw together. I've been involved in all sorts of models and collaborative models where people just said collaboration and then did nothing but collaboration. But other ones where, you know, that effort, that investment in time, in energy is there throughout. And things do work seamlessly. You know, it is a very different thing, but you have to be committed to doing it for the right reasons.
Yeah.
I really agree with that, Stuart. I think you're absolutely right, because it feels like it should be something that naturally happens. But I think actually you have to set a framework at the beginning. At the beginning, it needs to be a little bit mechanistic until it becomes the culture, the habit, the way of working. So it is crucial to get that framework, that sort of structure in the start. And then once you've been doing it for a while, it becomes more like breathing. Everyone is not focused on who their employer is. They're focused on that common goal.
And it starts with us. It starts with the leadership team. As you quite rightly said, it's a journey.
Yep.
And we started 5 years ago, this Southern Rail System Alliance.
Yep.
And it was a journey. And we set the ways we work together. We set the objectives and vision. And then on an ongoing basis, we have to make sure that it's applied throughout the organization. And that's an ongoing feast, really.
Mm.
Yeah.
So, look, Andre, you mentioned it there, the South Rail Systems Alliance. It's no accident the three of you are in this room together. ACOM, Colas, Network Rail form the South Rail Systems Alliance. Before we go any further, for those people who aren't aware of it, Susan, can you give us a little bit of background on the Alliance? And
Sure. So the Alliance is a 10-year framework, started in 2019, and it's one of 3 rail alliances. So the country is split into 3 horizontally, and so we're covering the south. And it is, as you say, Network Rail and Colas and ACOM, and we're focused on working together. We've got clear goals, which is the delivery of the passenger service for the country, for the south of the country. And we have to work together on renewals and enhancements of the rail network in those geographies to benefit the passengers.
So, I mean, in the preparation for this, a few of you talked about informal versus formal collaboration. Is an alliance, is that a formal collaboration? Is that how we would look at it?
Yeah, you have to have a mixture of both. You've got the formal mechanism, which goes back to when I started. So you've got to set out, you've got to have the right contractual mechanism, you've got to have the right organizational arrangements, you've got to bring the right teams together. And that's the formal part of it. But then it becomes quite informal because people form relationships. People have got personality. People have got expectations. They go through real life happening, real incidents happening. One of the things I was going to say actually about the successful part of it, and this is where probably the informal comes in, things will be challenging. There'll be challenging jobs. There will be things go wrong sometimes. And that's where the informal really comes in, because everyone, you could revert to criticism and blame when things get really difficult, but that informal arrangement that people say, hang on a minute, we're all focused here together, and maybe there was something went wrong. How do we build on that? How do we learn on that? And that's the maturity. So I think the real success is where you have that formal framework, and then you create that culture and behavior set that's the informal bit that really makes it work. And I have seen success in traditional contractual relationships where actually they weren't set up for that, but the informal bit was so powerful that you get through all those things. So to me, it's a blend of both. That's when you really get success.
That's a great point, because it's such a complex environment. We're facing such issues throughout the works and planning for works, and the environment of openness and honesty, and we talk regardless the T-shirt, as you say, makes fixing things much easier, and making continuous improvement much easier. And that's what I find in this environment.
Yeah, and I think inevitably in what we're doing, you've got the formal touch points. So you've got design reviews and regular diarised meetings where teams who are working on a particular site or particular piece of scope need to get together, that's diarised. But in between that, we've got people co-located. We've got ACOM designers based in Network Rail offices. We've got Network Rail staff in ours. We spend time in COLAS locations, etc. And it also means then people can just naturally get together. Engineers do like to collaborate. Getting together around a model, used to be drawings in the old days, but it's models these days, getting together and actually discussing and looking at what's going on and understanding whether you're from the signalling perspective or the track or something to do with the overhead line equipment, how it all needs to work together. You have to be able to do that, but you get both the formal and the informal, and that's why it works well.
We'll come on to the technology that enables collaboration later on, but why is it important? Why does it matter?
Well, to me, it matters. We're spending a huge amount of investment in the railway, whether it's renewal or enhancement or whatever. But we have a really complex rail environment in the UK. And we only do two things with that rail network. We can either run trains and serve passengers and serve freight, or we do work. And it's expensive. It's an expensive industry. So it's important for those two reasons. When we're not running trains and serving, the work we do has to be really efficient, really effective. We don't want the work we do to impact other than in a planned way on service. So we've got to be absolutely precise in what we deliver. But the draw on government funds, we're heavily government funded as a rail industry. So competing for those funds in that investment in a critical national infrastructure has got to be done wisely. We've got to think of it is our money. It's taxpayers' money fundamentally we're spending. So with those two considerations, it's important that we get the best value for money out of every penny, every pound we spend. But it's important that we have a complete service mindset at the back of our heads, because we're not laying track, we're not building platform, we're providing a railway service to benefit the country. And this is unquestionably the most effective way. Everyone has to understand, whether you're a welder, whether you're a surveyor, whether you're a project manager, why am I doing this? So that the trains run on time and we deliver great service.
Yeah. Yeah. And how do you make everybody understand that? I mean, do you feel that there was a real culture, particularly, well, let's focus on the Alliance for the moment, but is there a culture that everyone understands why it needs to be done collaboratively, why that approach needs to be taken?
Well, as I said, again, it goes straight from the top. We regularly engage with the teams. We meet the teams on ALT meetings. We've got events where we basically confirm the priorities, confirm the major outcomes we expect, and the ways we work together. And it goes straight from the bottom and from the top, yeah.
Absolutely, as Andre said, we walk the talk. Look, you've got the three of us in the room today, because we all believe it matters. We're all demonstrating as leaders that it matters, and we demonstrate that to our teams. And we've got thousands of miles of railway infrastructure, delivering services for, I don't know, millions of passengers every day. I don't know what the stats are, but clearly a lot of people are reliant on trains every day to get to work or to get to, wherever their education is. It needs to be working successfully. And a lot of that infrastructure is quite old, goes back a couple of 100 years in cases. And we also know we've got the growing challenges, things like climate adaptation, the changes in the weather, the last couple of weeks where we've had some unseasonably hot weather, the impact on the track, the risk to the track from that, or the dangers of, flooding and problems that causes. So there's constant demands to work on the infrastructure, but also we have to make sure it's working for people who need to use the services every day.
And if I could add, the impact on service, particularly with this alliance and with what we do with Track, as I said, we can only do these two things. We can run trains or we can do work. And every week, as a Network Rail region with the two routes, we got Wales and Western Route. Every week, we got two focuses, which is how well are we running those train services and how well have we done the work? And with this alliance, with the Track, this is the one bit of the investment we do. Every day, we are going in and taking possession of the railway line and either taking it apart or surveying it and then putting it back together so we can run service. But a lot of our other projects, we may do a lot of planning and off-site work and then we renew a bridge. But here, literally every day, we are having an intervention on the railway in multiple places across the region. So that impact, if we got it wrong, would be so significant. So as every week as a regional executive member, we sit there and we look at the train performance and how that's impacted, and we look at the engineering performance and predominantly driven by what we're doing in this alliance and how well we did that. Because it's important for the future, because obviously we want new track and all those sort of things, but it's important day in, day out. Because get it wrong, we affect the service the next day. It's that critical.
Yeah.
Are there any examples you can give me? There are a lot of people who will be listening to this podcast on the train into work. And we've all experienced disruption. Obviously, that's part of everyday life. But are there any examples you can give people, say, like, this is actually how we drive collaboration?
I've got a great recent one which we're building on. One of the most iconic pieces of infrastructure we've got on our railway is the Severn Tunnel, 4.5 miles long, really significant, connects England and Wales, busy main line, busy freight. And renewing the track in there is, that's a tricky thing to do. But by our teams having this mature relationship, we've worked out actually we can do that more efficiently and more effectively if we do more of it in one go. And we recently did a significant, I think it was 2 miles of track we renewed in one go in a couple of weeks. and it's the most efficient delivery we've got in the region. And people say, hang on a minute, you're in the middle of the Severn Tunnel complex thing, and you did the most efficient job. And with that, and thinking that way, we're thinking, how can we do that elsewhere? So that was a great example of designers, asset managers, engineers, constructors, train planners, train operating companies, all coming together to say, this is the right way to do it. And that's a brilliant example. And we've got lots more of those sort of things we're looking at. So that would be the one that I'd use because it's really fresh in my mind.
Okay.
I think because of the agility we've got, because of the ways of working we've developed that allow accelerating things, that allow, achieve things that would in standard contractual environment be impossible. I'll give another example. We can pick up work later in the process, like for instance, Oxford crossovers, and through the streamlined process of design and build, deliver those works. Derailments, if there is a derailment, God forbid, on the patch, the teams will accelerate the works again and are the best for that to put the track in the right shape again. So we've got plenty of examples of that. And again, because people have got best for project in mind, always best for project.
And I think the other element we didn't talk about, the benefits of collaboration, is trust. So because you've built up the working relationship, and particularly with a 10-year framework, 10 years working together, that's a long time to work together. You can build a lot of trust in that time. You've got ability for people to develop their careers because they have time on the project and they can grow and take on additional responsibility. And people then get confidence. They're confident to suggest improvements, suggest different ways of doing things. Sometimes we had a recent example where we actually said to Network Rail, we don't think we should do that design to that stage because you're not going to build it right now. So you're actually going to do work that in the future someone else will take off the shelf, probably will want to change some of it at that stage. Makes no sense to go that far with the design now. We should stop at this earlier stage, pause it there. So we consciously said, don't give us this phase of work now. You know, we actually turned work away, which you don't think a private sector company is going to do, but because it was the better thing to do for the overall position.
Yeah. I mean, you touched on it then. I talked to you before we started about how do you maintain collaboration? Because on a short-term program or a short-term project, it's great to get people excited and really get that buzz going. But as you say, on a 10-year agreement, how do you keep it fresh and how do you keep improving your approach?
Well, we have constant KPIs that grow every year, and expectations of efficiency, expectations of how we can improve things. Always there. And Stuart's example just now, where he was talking about the Severn Tunnel, that's exciting. The bringing everyone together to actually deliver a renewal of a significant piece of track, critical national infrastructure, as we said, but doing that in an innovative way, actually, that's exciting for people. Engineers like to do things that are innovative, that they can see will make a difference, that they can then see they can apply elsewhere. I don't think it's difficult to actually excite and engage people.
It's that commitment to a long-term relationship, is one of those vital things I talked about right at the start about how set up the framework that will be successful. Because the vast majority of people come to work to do a good job. Yeah. So, and everyone being really engaged and saying, actually, I really enjoyed being part of that and I want to do more. And it gives you that time to invest and then say, let's get the extras, get the bread and butter right, get the delivery right day in, day out. And then you can start to do some really exciting things, bringing new ways of working, different techniques that will improve against those KPIs, because you've got to be business focused. You absolutely have to be. And how can you build on that? And people just get really engaged with that. Whereas the sort of short-term relationships, get that bridge built or whatever, you can never really foster that. Of course, you do some really good jobs in those ways, but it's that investment in time that people want to do better and understand what the outcome is. So it does become a self-fulfilling thing. We're here together. We all want to be really successful all the way through, and keep focused on your business outcomes. Keep focused on excellence and reward for that as well.
For this, there's a massive accountability of the leadership of the Alliance, though, to bring on our own behalves to the Alliance the best capability our organization have got.
Yep.
So for Colas, worldwide construction leader, we need to bring in the best. We've got AECOM the same.
Yep.
And on the network rail side, Stuart's representatives have to obviously pull the strings within network rail, enable stuff all the way up the chain, starting from specification, possession regime, etc., etc. So it is massive accountability on us to make it work. Yeah?
Dare I ask, are there times when you've seen collaboration not work and or maybe been lacking, and how have you corrected that? Without dropping anyone in it.
No, well, not here, but I said earlier on, you've got to have that commitment. It's got to be there. And there've been people who said it out and just said the word collaboration and thought it would just happen. Mm-hmm. And there's two bits to it, because I think where people get it wrong, where I've seen it go wrong, is you think it's sort of softening your management. Collaboration must mean, well, that's a bit more soft, a bit more engaging. But it's actually, there's more discipline, and it goes back to that formal, informal thing. That a real great collaboration actually has really strict discipline. It is far more rigorous in the discipline of doing things right, because then you can build the icing on top. So where I have seen it go wrong, it's where that's been confusing collaboration with weak control or weak management. It is absolutely not. Far more discipline, far more control, far more non-acceptance of failure, because you've got that really strong cultural side to it that works. So I have seen them go wrong, but it's normally because they've been set up wrong, or they've not understood it is really disciplined and really focused as well, or it's unclear what exactly it is you're trying to achieve. Those are the examples that I would have.
We're obviously talking primarily about collaboration in the rail industry, but any fantastic examples around the Severn Tunnel? What can other industries learn? Susan, obviously, AECOM will work across many, many industries.
Yes.
What do colleagues at AECOM learn from your experiences, the team experiences?
Oh gosh, that's a hard one. I'm
Sorry,
I'm struggling
I've dropped you in here with that one.
Yeah, I'm struggling to immediately think collaboration goes wider than the rail team, I suppose, is the first thing I would say. Perhaps not so much on this alliance, but in other pieces of work, we need to bring in our colleagues from the environment team. We might be bringing in colleagues from architecture. If we're focused on a station design, for example, you require architects and engineers to work together. And I actually heard an example yesterday of somebody talking about how engineers like structure and process, and architects want freedom. Mm-hmm. So when you bring those two together, you sometimes have a bit of a clash of sort of style and almost personality, I suppose. And you have to find ways to make that work, again, to deliver whatever the outcome might be, whether it is a station or something else. So I think, again, it's working on projects. It's having that common goal, whatever that common goal might be. And so it does spread to other disciplines, to people who might not always be working on rail projects, but will spend some of their time on rail projects.
It's an interesting point. I find the UK rail a really mature market, because you can see that we've learned the hard way. Yeah. And I think Network Rail leading the right way through collaboration going forward. I think working for a massive company, I've got lots of requests from my colleagues across the world about how it works, and I've got people coming in and trying to understand and influence the market in the same way, in terms of ways of working. So credit to the UK rail industry, to be fair.
And actually, we're obviously an arm's length body of the government, and working in government circles, we've been running a thing called the Speed Initiative, which is looking at how we can do projects quicker and more efficiently. And we had some really great examples. We've got quite a few in Wales and Western where we've embraced that, which is basically it's collaborative approach for exceptional outcomes. And so we share that information across government departments. We've provided case studies to highways, to other government departments. So there's a lot of learning. We love taking learning from other sectors. That's why it's important we work with people like Colas and AECOM so we can get expertise from elsewhere. But we also love sharing the information in other areas where we can demonstrate what we've done provides a real benefit. And that's a real rich vein for us, that drawing in as much knowledge as we can, but also sharing best practice where we've got across all government departments where there's expenditure as well. So that loads of learning that we try and share both ways.
A fantastic example of this maturity, and this is the right way to go, is COVID. During COVID, everything gone to halt, stopped. We got together and continued working, established measures, and made impossible possible. That's a fantastic example where the whole world was really watching.
Yeah.
Yes, that's true. That's true. And you're right, Andre. You talked about the global perspective and looking to the UK as a mature market. We get clients in places as far afield as Australia, but a bit closer to home, places like Ireland or Sweden, asking about alliancing. What's your experiences of alliancing? What is an alliance? How does it work? What are the benefits? So there are people looking from outside UK PLC, peering in and saying, what have they got here? Yeah.
Yeah, you touched on it earlier, talking about the technology and the way that that's changed, and Andre talking about where we've gone from COVID and how we're, I think, really embracing technology more than ever now, and we're accelerating that delivery of new technology, new innovation. How is technology enabling collaboration now, and perhaps where's it going in the future?
Well, there's a great example. One of the things we have to use in everything is data and knowledge. Yeah. An efficient use of data and knowledge that we gain either through survey to be able to design things or in performance and so on. And in fact, one of the speed project examples we give is where we said we've already got a lot of this data, and we can share and collaborate on the use of data wherever it's come from to better effect. So that's a really basic, simple example, but that ability to invest in time means, we're not doing a one-off job here. We've got time to say, actually, is there a better way we can survey? We use drones extensively. We use remote gathering of information extensively. We think there's a lot more we can do with that, and we want to press on that. But then in the construction side as well, the use of sophisticated plant or different materials or off-site manufacture or wherever we can. The rail track work that we do is probably one of the more advanced because we've tended to have longer-term relationships. But I think we're scratching at the surface of the possibility, and to really drive those exceptional results, there's so much more we can get. And that's probably an area where some sectors are much more advanced that we want to bring in. So we're there, we do a lot, there's a lot more we can do.
I agree. We have to challenge ourselves. We have to challenge the standards so we work smarter and bring new technologies in. There are some very good examples, of course, but drive towards efficiency and everything, we need to do more, yeah.
Absolutely. There's all sorts of reasons why technology is important. Firstly, from a safety point of view, that we were always talking about getting boots off the ballast. So avoiding having human beings on the railway as much as possible. So Stuart talked about surveying. The more surveying we can do using technology rather than human beings, massive advantage from safety and an efficiency point of view. So that's easier to do. Try things. They might not always work, but in a 10-year framework, you've got the scope, you've got the time, you've got the ability to try things, and some will work and some won't. Also, I think because you've got that collaborative relationship, and we talked about you've built that, you've got the trust, you get innovation. You get people saying, surely there's a better way of doing this. Can't we try this? Can't we try that? All sorts of examples throughout the alliance. Anything from the tags you can wear on your helmet when you're out on site that will buzz if there's moving plant in your vicinity, so that you're made more aware of that. That's a simple example. Recycled composite sleepers, so that you're reducing the carbon content is another one. Looking at battery-powered tools, looking at hydrogen fuel for plant and equipment. There's a list as long as your arm. But I also agree with what Andre said, that I come from an aerospace background before I came into rail. And I think use of lean technology and lean processes, is something that I think the rail sector could do more of and could benefit more from. But, that takes time, and it needs that space that doesn't always exist, but does in a 10-year framework.
But again, in the environment we work in a collaborative environment, we can challenge. Yeah. There is no unreasonable responses coming back to you. People focused on one goal, and it's an easier environment for accelerating things like this.
Yeah.
And it's that word goal keeps coming up again and again. And that seems to me to be a real focus for this, allowing people to understand where they need to be. So there are those opportunities to bring ideas and know that while they might be deviating slightly off the original plan, as long as they get to the end goal, it creates that safe environment, I suppose.
It does. And remember, the end goal is always passenger service.
Yeah.
On time passenger service. That's always the goal. But yeah, that's very clear to everybody.
Great. Now, before we start to wind up, because I do want to release you so you can go and continue to drive collaboration in the rail industry. For people listening to this today who might not necessarily be in the rail industry or be in all sorts of walks of life, what are the sort of practical tips that people can take from this, listen to this podcast around if they want to drive or accelerate collaboration in their place of work or even maybe at home?
Start by understanding what it is you're trying to achieve. If you be absolutely clear, that single principle, we need to achieve this. And then if you're in a complex world and you say, right, okay, don't think you can just throw it together and it will happen. You've got to think of the makeup of the parties that are going to be collaborating, that you need to collaborate. Then set that structural model. So whether it's a contract model, whether it's a written agreement as to how we'll behave, whatever, if it's not a contract world, and then be clear to everybody and share it across the teams. We're doing this for these reasons. This is what success looks like, and constantly keep checking.
Come on.
What can you add to
Susan,
that? Yeah.
No, I'm going.
The beginnings are challenging,
because
we're changing behaviors. So be strong and persist. That's my advice, because
Good.
at the end of all of that is a great performing organization. Yeah,
great.
And leaders, obviously, we have to lead from the front, and then we have to make sure everyone else is behaving in the same way.
And that's a really important point, actually, because if it is a changed world from what people are used to, people will be nervous, because quite often you're saying, we want you to work in a very different way to the way you've worked. We trust you to do that. You've got our support to do that. This is what's important to us. And as long as you do, you're focused on what's important, we've got your back as leaders. We know things will go wrong. We know things, but we will support you as long as you approach them in that way that resolves it for the benefit. And a lot of people are looking for that. I'm going through a major program of change across all the other areas that we're working in Wales and Western, not just the track side. And you've got to give a huge amount of trust as a leader, but you've also got to be clear what the accountability you expect people to take. And that leadership piece is vitally important because, people need to know they're in a safe place where they can take risks, and I'm not talking safety risks at all, take risks in how they've done things, and that, you will support them in that. The leadership bit is vital.
Fantastic. Great place to end things today. Stuart, Andre, Susan, thank you so much for joining us today. I think it's been a really interesting chat, and I think there were some really interesting takeaways for people who are working in the rail industry and beyond from our conversation today. So thank you very much.